Welcome, everybody, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I'm your host, John Espinosa. I want to welcome everybody this evening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, please click the subscribe button. It is helping get this word out to as many people as we possibly can, and it goes along with our mission of helping others get to where they're going. Tonight I want to talk about a topic that I get a lot of questions about, either through the DMs or comments in my various videos and podcasts especially. And that centers around imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome, I want to read you guys the definition that I Googled up here, but it's self-doubt, fear of being exploited despite having a competence. So when we think about that, and we begin to uncover what imposter syndrome is. At least I'll talk about my personal example of imposter syndrome. It has to do with this very podcast. But for others, they don't see themselves as a leader. They have a vision of a leader, or maybe they go to a friend and let them know that, hey, I'm a leader of an organization. And what happens? That person, that friend chuckles, or kind of like, what are you talking about? You're a leader? Those types of things begin to creep into our head, and they are the core of what imposter syndrome is about. You may be the most qualified leader in the room, and in your mind, if you do not believe it, those self-doubt, the thoughts, I've talked about thought stacking before. I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a leader. We begin to believe that. So today I'm going to talk about some tips and tricks that I personally use whenever that self-doubt starts to creep into my head. And then I'll discuss just briefly, when I began this podcast, the thoughts that I had and I continue to have about really me getting in front of this camera and sharing my leadership story. So let's dig into this thing. One thing that imposter syndrome creates is hesitancy. And when we are hesitant to move, it's that fight, flight, or freeze mentality that we have. And that's what imposter syndrome creates for us is we become frozen. We're not really fighting for what we want, and we're not really running away from it. We're just stuck. And I will tell you, I would rather be moving forward or moving away from any challenge than be frozen. Because once we become frozen, that's when panic sets in. That's when that hesitant feeling of, I don't know what to do. Almost that stage fright. I'm sure you felt that before. I felt that before, whether it's getting on a stage, it's entering a room, a meeting room, where I'm doing a brief and I'm the person in the room with all the facts. I begin to start doubting myself, and what happens? Anxiety builds and I become frozen. So let's unpack some of the tips and tricks that I use whenever I begin to have that self-doubt, the beginnings of an imposter syndrome episode, at least for me. When I began planning for this podcast, and you all have heard me tell this story many, many times, I had to have the perfect lights. I had to have the perfect camera. I had to have the perfect microphone. Wait, hold on. My tagline wasn't just right. There was many reasons why I just didn't get started. And I was frozen. I was telling myself that I wasn't good enough to sit in front of this camera and share my leadership journey. Followed a bunch of podcasts. I mentioned the conference that I went to in September of 2023 that really got me going in some life circumstances, some things that in my life threw me over the edge. But all along the way, I was stuck. I was frozen. I was hesitant to leap into what I knew was my calling, what I knew was the right thing to do, what I felt was the right thing to do. But because of my self-doubt, because I needed all the things that were perfect. I needed to have, 100 episodes recorded before I started. I need to have 100 ideas for those episodes before I got started. We begin to tell ourselves all these different things. And when it comes to leadership, it's no different. We begin to convince ourselves that we're not leaders. We begin to tell ourselves that whatever we're thinking about how we make decisions, about our leadership style, about how we're perceived, about how we even perceive ourselves, has nothing to do with leadership. It's contrary to what we see leadership as. And again, it begins to stack all of those thoughts. And this theme of mindfulness that we're going to carry forward through season 3 is going to be important on how we get through that being stuck and not necessarily get over those thoughts, because the minute that you have a bad day, the minute that something you planned 4 didn't go as well as you thought it would. There it comes again. There's that voice in the back of your head. There's that imposter coming in and telling you, see, I told you you weren't good enough. See, I told you you shouldn't have said that. See, I told you you shouldn't have spoken up in that meeting. Have you been there before? Am I the only one? I know I'm not the only one because I coach and I mentor people and we talk about these things. And it's funny that whenever I have those feelings, I'm like, man, I must be the only one that's feeling this way. There are other people that are having those same thoughts. And you can tell when somebody just doesn't feel right, is getting into a meeting, maybe has a brief, maybe got out of a briefing or a team presentation for the first time. They're presenting in front of their team or to their team members or to the peers and the leaders, or maybe even it's upper leadership. And we always question, well, I should have said this better. I do this during the podcast. I listen to myself. I listen to every single podcast as soon as I record it. And I'm like, man, I shouldn't have said that, or I should have added this in that area. We're always going to want to do things better, which is great. That is a great characteristic to have. But we are not perfect individuals. So we have to remember and catch ourselves whenever we start telling ourselves the opposite of what we need to be believing, we got to stop that. One of the ways that I do that, I am statements. I am statements. Whenever I'm heading up on a stage and I'm speaking in front of an audience, what do I tell myself? I am going to knock this out of the park. I am excited for this moment. And just think about that for a little bit. Whenever you tell yourself you're nervous or you're anxious, what are the physiological responses that we have? Again, back to the mindfulness part. What happens? We get sweaty palms, we get butterflies in our stomach, maybe our heart starts to, elevate as far as heartbeat, okay? Now think about this. So we got all that in our head when we're anxious, when we're nervous. Now, what feelings, what physiological responses do you have when you are excited about something? I don't know about you, but my heart rate raises. I get sweaty palms. I get those butterflies in my stomach. So what's the difference here? I am nervous or I am excited for this opportunity. I don't know about you, but if I'm going to feel the same way, I'm going to take the motivational road. I'm going to take the positive road out of that whole conversation, and I'm going to tell myself I am excited for this opportunity. I am a leader. I am a podcaster. I can do these things. There is power in I am statements. So next time that you are beginning to doubt who you are and what you do in the competence that you have, start with an I am statement. I am a leader. I am the subject matter expert. I am whatever rank in your company that you have. I am meant to be here. That is going to change thoughts, the way that you're going to react, and the way that others are going to perceive you. I just know it will. I hope this helps somebody today. Remember to go out there next time that you're in that situation. Have belief in yourself. Tell yourself, I am worthy. I am meant to be here. I am a leader, because all of you that are out there listening are taking the extra step, taking the time to develop yourselves, and that is a leader in my book. Everybody have a great rest of your week. Go be great. Talk to everyone later. Bye-bye. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps us get others to where they're going.